and say, you know, if he does this, Rick,
Yeah.
you know we're in trouble.
Okay. How much time do we get when you do that? About 5 minutes, okay. Okay.
I'll welcome everybody, even though there's not a lot of everybody's. Normally there's a something of an audience, but I'll welcome everybody and kind of. This is the first one in about a year and a half, Lawrence.
So what, I don't understand, I don't know what's going on here.
Well, Lawrence started a series. He started Coffee and Poets, I'm going to guess, about 7 years ago. And
Lawrence started this?
Lawrence started this.
Oh, great. So you're a poet, Lawrence?
Yes.
Oh, man. I gotta get familiar with your stuff. What's his last name?
Dinkins. He also goes by Ensa'a.
Oh, okay.
You have Warrior Poet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen, yeah.
And if you've
Center.
seen you've seen him live, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So and Lawrence also, so he hosts at Luna's, or he used to host at Luna's before COVID, and also hosts at Mahogany, which is a spoken word on Wednesday night down on Broadway, 18th and Broadway. So Lawrence is a regular poetry host. He was on the board at SPC with me for a while. He did that for a number of years, and we do jazz and poetry things. Lawrence he did a thing called Poet versus Band that is so fun. I think it's the most fun I've ever had reading poetry with a band behind you, and really. So, I mean, we've done all kinds of different stuff, but Lawrence started Coffee and Poets, and it was monthly for, I don't know, maybe 5 years. You probably got 60 of them archived. So if you go to Coffee and Poets on, if you Google it, there'll be, I mean, I've interviewed Susan Kelly DeWitt, Allegra Silberstein, Andy Jones, did I interview Indigo? I can't remember. But I've interviewed 4 or 5. I mean, and normally he has different interviewers.
Yeah.
And then the interviewer picks the poet. So it's 2 poets talking about poetry.
Yeah.
It's a 60-minute, usually audio recording. Since he's got such handsome people, he's going with video.
Oh, there's some video too.
So we're live. Yeah, I didn't know that until I walked in, but.
Okay, well, I'll take this off.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's a project he's been doing for a long time, but because of COVID, he hasn't done it for a year and a half. And he'd kind of stopped, I think, in 2019 for a while. So this is the first one.
Oh.
So it's just it's an interview series. It's not so much of a poetry reading as it is just talking about poetry.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are ready?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Try to do something.
So should we put on headphones?
Yeah, you should.
You want us with headphones? Okay, we'll hear each other better.
Maybe I take my hat off then, huh?
You can leave your hat on.
Hang on.
Yeah.
My hair is looking pretty bad today.
The headphones make us look very technological, though.
Yeah.
Makes us look younger. I'm getting a lot of kind of a echoey
Oh, okay.
in my
You can
headphones.
adjust your volume. Number 1.
So is this me on the left here?
So,
Check one, check one. I guess that's okay. I'll get used to that.
okay.
So I'm ready when you are.
What was that class that Josh taught? It was on kind of mystic poetry. Do you remember the name of that? I can never remember that word.
It wasn't epiphany, it wasn't poetry of the divine. I remember it had kind of a weird title.
Yeah.
It
And I
was
couldn't.
it wasn't, yeah, I can't remember.
Sort of mystical. I didn't learn much.
Wasn't, what?
I didn't learn much in that class.
Yeah, I remember you weren't crazy about that one.
I think he had a relationship with a prophet, University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Okay.
You may know the guy. And he kind of was a little bit of that area. So I think Josh wanted to kind of become more familiar with the subject. And so the idea of the class was for him too. I mean, that was
Yeah.
no secret. You know, he was upfront about that. We just didn't get very far.
Every class is a little different as far as,
Yeah.
I'm excited about Yeats.
Are you? Good.
Yeah,
Good.
Yeats is a very cool poet. In fact, I'm learning that he was really into the occult and into psychics and seances and things like that. So I've been reading a book about him. I had read a biography a long time ago, and I'm reading this new biography that just focuses on kind of his connection to the occult and how he would go to meetings and go to seances and do all of these kind of writing exercises to try and be, almost like be possessed by, and he was not a Christian. I mean, his family, they were, this is really, I'm a little better with these off. I can hear you fine.
Okay.
I can hear you better with this off. I'm going to see if that works for Lawrence.
Okay.
So anyway, Yeats is just, his family was Protestant. His family was, they were Protestant Irish. They weren't Catholic Irish. But it's just really interesting because he kind of renounced that and just kind of was into like all this Eastern mysticism and Hindu and Rosicrucian and Rastafari. I mean, it wasn't Rastafarian, but all these obscure cults. I mean, he would just like, any cult he would hear about, he was like, oh, I got to go to that. I got to check it out. Because, and connect, wanting to connect with the dead.
Yeah.
Lawrence, I'm happier with headphones off. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because it's just, I was getting kind of a echoey, yeah.
Okay.
So, as long as I can hear Rick and Rick can hear
Wait,
me.
Lawrence was at your house when we had that fundraiser last year.
Yeah, Lawrence did the reading.
Yeah, that was great. I remember that now.
The Grinch.
Yeah, that was cool.
And Lawrence was the MC at my birthday party when we were in Lodi.
Okay.
7 years ago.
I remember that.
Yeah.
When I turned 60.
Yeah.
7.5.
I don't remember Lawrence for that, but I remember John doing a really good job.
Oh, John
Yeah.
did that song. He led everybody in that song.
That
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
fun. That was really fun.
Oh, wait.
Okay, well, I'm good to go if you are. Okay.
Yep.
So, welcome to Coffee and Poets. It is March 14th, 2021, and that's Pi Day, in case you're wondering, 3/14. It's also almost the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic. Everybody's talking about that, but Coffee and Poets is back, and we are here at the Brick House Gallery in Sacramento, Barbara Range's wonderful art gallery, and I'm here with producer Lawrence Dinkins, Ensa'a, who's putting all this together, and I'm here with my special guest, Rick Rayburn. My name's Bob Stanley, and I'm really honored to be hosting and doing some interviews and bring some poetry back into the airwaves. Rick is retired from a number of jobs. He was an environmentalist. He worked for state parks, a forester, and spent his life doing so many things. He's done so many things. A devoted husband, a wonderful dad. He coached teams. He's still close with his kids. I mentioned his career in natural resources. He's traveled the world, been to all kinds of amazing places. He was also a caregiver and has been a caregiver for Mary Ann, his wife, for many years. He's got 3 kids, 2 grandkids, and 1 on the way. And with all these interests and so many things in his life, maybe in the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm not exactly sure, but Rick started writing poetry, he started painting, he started doing sculpture, and I guess, Rick, my first question is, how did the arts just kind of pour into your life, and how and why? Where did that all come from?
Well, I've always been interested in the arts, but I never took the time to really get involved. I was more of a science guy, forest ecologist, redwood ecologist, and spent most of my life in coastal protection with the Coastal Commission, North Coast. And when I retired, my wife and I had plans doing a number of things, but they fell apart when she got sick, just kind of all of a sudden jumped into like stage 4 Alzheimer's, and now is living outside the home about 5 blocks from where I live. And I have a lot of time now that I'm retired. And I think, Bob, you invited me to 4.5 years ago, a poetry class, eco-poetry. And that's where things started, like 4.5 years ago. We did a little bit of writing, I think, with you on some prose stuff before, but that class has really got me going. And since then, as things evolved in poetry and taking other workshops, other things become interesting. You begin to see how art plays into poetry, as music plays into it. And I've always had this sort of interest in reaching out and doing different new things, growing. And that's just, with a lot of this free time, it's all of a sudden filled up with these neat things in the various worlds of art. Not so much music, but yeah, that's kind of thumbnail.
Well, there's music and poetry too.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, that's right. A lot of my poems, I'll talk about them, actually are music in my head from decades ago that have stayed and have been poems developed in the last few years because of that. Yeah.
So the poet Rilke talks about how our childhood, our younger days is like a great storehouse for writing and creating, and that in some ways he says that it's the greatest storehouse, that it's really where the strongest images and the strongest memories come from. And I know in your book too, in Under the Overstory, you've got lots of memories there. What is it when you want to write a poem, or where do you start when you want to write a poem? What do you think about, or how does that work for you?
Well, I have my cell phone, just a ton of kind of random stuff as it comes into my mind, whether I'm driving. Usually I drive I never listen to the radio. Matter of fact, I bought a new car recently, and it comes on automatic with the radio, loud. And then it won't even, when you turn the car off, the radio won't even go off. You know, it's like, oh man, twice a day. Turn the radio because I want to think, about some of these ideas. And it was recently I had to do a poem for a group that met yesterday, and we workshopped it. And I was driving, and I was thinking, what are those things from long ago that kind of have stuck with me? And one of them was these 2 words, Chavez Ravine. And when I was a 4th, 5th grader, the Dodgers were coming to Los Angeles, where I lived, Pasadena. It was like, oh my gosh, this is like the greatest thing in the world. And I asked my dad, where the Dodgers could play? And he said, Chavez Ravine. And that just had music to it. It's been with me, that word. So I wrote this poem, we workshopped it yesterday, and 4 different places in this poem is Chavez Ravine, because it just is that music in my ear. And then there's some poems in here that are sounds from the past that have stuck with me, that are in 3 or 4 of my poems.
You want to pick one?
Sure, yeah. This poem is from my book, Under the Understory. It's called Mazatlan, Easter, 1967. And that's when this sound first resonated with me. Jasmine breeze loads our tent. Black sky above, a night hawk's haunting call fades. Shirtless, we doze off on our bags to the unfolding shore break over wet, coarse sand. Brushed by lime green vines, tropical palm forest mutes sunrise. Looming island rests on a turquoise sea. We awake to plain song. Pan, pan, leche, leche, banana, watermelon. Mysterious as a medieval chant, echoing off cold stone walls. Pan, pan, leche, leche, banana, watermelon. The man, bare-chested in khakis and sandals, nods, Buenos dias, señoras. On the campground road, his morning offering on a two-wheeled cart, flagged in red, white, and green. Warm rolls, cold milk, fruit, black and red cans of cerveza. We order with our hands. Pesos? He strokes a scruffy cheek. 20 pesos, por favor, staring at a parrot perched on an outdoor shower head. Feliz Pascua, he pushes down the rutted clay road. Pan, pan, leche, leche, banana, watermelon. So that's what came out of that 40-year-old memory of just those three simple words, or lines.
So just the sound of the words. I love the way you read that. I've heard that a number of times before. I think this was the best one. You're getting that baritone or that bass note, but also it just kind of reminded me like a Hindu chant or something. It's just getting deeper and deeper. You're getting mystical about it.
Here's another one that came from my mind I wrote recently. It's a short poem. It's called Bells. But in 1980, Marianne and I and the three kids took a month off of school in April and got a minivan and drove, camper van, drove around Europe. And on Easter morning in Salzburg, we were going to Mass, and I dropped them off there as an 8 o'clock Easter Mass. And so I parked the van, and I was walking up by myself as the 7 10-foot copper bells of the cathedral in Salzburg began ringing in this alpine valley, and the sound was just, numbing. It was, it's something that's been there happening for 1,000 years, and that just stayed. I can still, hear that, feel it, and so that prompted this poem with an epigraph: "Praise Him with loud cymbals, praise Him, resounding cymbals." That's Psalm 150. Easter, 1989. Above the Salzburg Cathedral bells tolled triumphant allies. Crusaders marching to Jerusalem, pelled for blood of the Lamb. This morning, 7 10-foot copper bells clang, calling us to Mass. Sky unlocks over 1,000 years. Alpine Valley trembles, chiming.
Sky unlocks over 1,000 years.
It's like, every Easter, well, probably every Sunday, those bells just start, giant bells, and they just start clanging, and it's like, when I went to Europe then, I cried twice. Once when I first came up out of the subway and saw the first European city, that was Munich. I couldn't believe it, I was overwhelmed. And the other time was with these bells. I started crying, got teary. Anyway, those are the kind of things, like Josh McKinney in the back of my book, what Josh says, he looked at my poems, and he knows a lot of these poems are about memories from my past. Music, when soft voices die, vibrates in the memory. Poem that was written by Percy Shelley. And, pretty nice with it.
Well, it's funny you talk about, we go on trips to have a good time and celebrate, and yet I think that there's kind of an artistic temperament in the things that move us the most amazing things. We start crying. It's like,
Yeah.
are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm crying. I'm happy.
Yeah, that's the way it was,
So poetry's a place for emotion, I think, a kind of
Yeah.
a special place where you can access. Certain poem touched somebody, or they said, "Wow, Rick, you remembered this," or somebody was just like, you've been able to reconnect with people in any way because of what you wrote.
yeah, and not as much as I kind of thought. But yeah, there was those some of those feedbacks, like mainly, I can't believe you're doing poetry, really?
I've been hearing that all my life.
You, a poet? Come on. And I said, well, it's a good thing. I'm still, like I said in my reading, I still drink IPA beer, and I like baseball, and Jack Nicholson's my man. But no, poetry's great, and I have had a couple discussions with people. I said, well, what has it done for you? Because I did tell them I spent a lot of time. I get up early in the morning, excited. I don't have to go to work, and I can just write poetry. I enjoy writing poetry more than I do reading it, although I do both, but it's so much fun to write. So it kind of, Benny thought, well, what has poetry done really for me? And one thing, it has introduced me to an unbelievable community of people. That first class I took back in, 4.5 years ago at Sacramento Poetry Center, there was 11 people, actually, including the teacher, Josh. And I'm on first name basis, workshop poems with 10 of those 11 people for the last 4 years. All of a sudden you got a group of friends. And then there's other groups I'm a part of. I don't know, I must have, 30 first name friends from the Sacramento poetry community, which I think is just awesome. I really do. It is a good group. It's a wonderful group. I feel very fortunate to have made those friendships. And we talked a little bit about how the poetry has expanded my interest in art, feelings. I wasn't much of a feeling guy. When my wife was she was in good shape. One of the things that bothered her a lot was feelings weren't natural for me to discuss with her. I was more, what are we going to do today? Let's go take a hike, this kind of stuff, rather than what's really on your heart. And that is through poetry, as well as my wife's illness, reflecting on what she thought was important in life. That has made a big difference in, I think, listening to others and trying to understand the way I feel and the way people feel. The other thing is that I think through poetry, I've become a better reader. I read better stuff. I can really appreciate good writing now, whereas before I read mysteries. That was probably it.
That's a good thing.
And now it's a much broader. I'm not a great reader. I'm a slow reader. I'm not a great verbal reader of poetry. That's one of the things I really want to improve upon. But all these things are, contribute to I think a greater well-being, but in improving relationships with people, my family. That's noticeable to me as you become a listener and you talk about things that poetry brings forward that are deeper than who won the doubleheader last night between the Giants and the Dodgers. And I think poetry. I know poetry has made me much more in tune with me, improve my own personal relationship with myself. I like myself. I like myself better now. And then one thing you can't help but in poetry get down to one of the deepest things, and that's your spiritual beliefs. And up until this point, still am Catholic. I converted to Catholicism after I married Marianne, and but that was kind of like, okay, it was all right. I led songs and catechism, that kind of stuff. And, it was I understood what was going on in terms of the gospel, and but then, poetry challenges you, like your faith. And I'm really a doubting Thomas guy. I don't know if there's a God for sure. I like to think there is. I like to think I know about what kind of person God is, but I don't know for sure. But I began to explore that, and I have a couple poems that I picked up as it relates to that, and trying to understand more about the spiritual side of our life. And I don't know if when I die, I don't know if I'm going to ever really understand at that point. Is there really a God? My faith's weak, but it's a great thing to explore and establish in your life, whether you're positive or not, that there's a God out there. So that's kind of my weird spiritual side of my life, which I find interesting.
That's great. So you were mentioning all the poets you've come in contact with and people you've met. What about poets you've read? Do you have anything you might want to read from another poet, or talk a little bit about?
Well, one of the things that struck me as I was thinking about this interview is like, how are we doing on time anyway? It was the idea that the poetry has been around a long time, and there's so much, especially as it relates to back since Homer's time, with a number of Bob, you and others, we took a class of Homer, and after that kind of moved to some Shakespeare, and present day, and all through this there's this aspect in poetry of deep personal understanding of the spiritual side of the world or whatever. I'm really interested in, and let me see if I can find it here. And it is actually a poet I really like. Persimmons. The wind waves hanging from the axles hold it still. The best in the world, I say, of persimmons. Perfect statement of emptiness, no other than form. The twig and the stalk stand still. On the way they sell them to the market, even now. The originals in Kyoto at a lovely Rinzai temple where they show it once a year. This one's a perfect copy. This great painting, 1200 from China, is picked up by this poet up in Nevada City, and it just happens. I love persimmons. I like to dry them each year and put them into salads through the dead of winter. This orange, so yeah, I like that.
Well, it's cool. I mean.
Oh, then I planted the tree 2 days ago, a persimmon tree right in this main spot of my yard. It's where I used to have my yo-yo tree, and that broke and fell apart, so I put in a persimmon tree. And so, in the dead of winter, it's going to be pretty nice.
And because of the poem? Or because you like persimmons, or both?
It wasn't because of the poem, but the poem was a great read. When people come and see it in the fall, I'll read them the poem. But
Perfect.
I was looking for some color in the fall, and
Yeah.
food in the winter.
Well, I like that inscription about how the cure for hunger, the perfect cure for hunger, is a painting about a rice cake.
Yeah.
So then he does a poem about a persimmon. So it's really, it's not, it's a poem about persimmons, but it's a poem about how art cures us or helps
Yeah.
us in so many ways. So,
Yeah, and it's been around for almost 1,000 years. So that's pretty cool. There's another one I want to read. There's actually two more. Let's see, recently I've been taking, which I never would have done in a million years, a Shakespeare class, and we finished 3 weeks ago, The Merchant of Venice. And, there's some great lyrical verse in Shakespeare. It's hard for me to understand. It's not easy reading. So when you really study it with some help, things do become very meaningful and stuff that will stay with you. And this particular one of The Merchant of Venice, my favorite character in The Merchant of Venice is Portia. And Portia's at the trial of Antonio, right?
yeah.
Antonio's trial. And she's interrogating, or actually questioning, Shylock, who in this movie I saw was played by... Who's the guy that played Shylock in the movie? He was also the Godfather.
Yeah, Pacino.
Al Pacino. Oh, yeah, Al Pacino. He's this great Shylock. And so there's Portia, this young, beautiful Italian, speaking to him. And you've all heard this one way or another. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as a gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It is blessed him that giveth and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest of the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above his scepter sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. That's great, isn't it?
That's really great.
It is. Well, that's poetry. I mean, poetry is just so broad. It's so old. It's everywhere, and you look, and people have been saying things in a different way through poetry and poems, which up until, I should read. This is actually my first poem before I took a class. Before I took that class 4.5 years ago, I wrote this poem in 5th grade, and it's in my book. So this is how far I've come.
The beginning.
This is April in 1955. Spring is here. All the deer drink beer. The birds and the bees eat the trees. The trees sneeze because they freeze and fall on their knees and pray to the bees. You got a D+ on that poem. And I wrote a poem about that, my D+ poem. Anyway, poetry's everywhere,
Well, that was pretty good. You got nature in there. You got the birds and the bees. That's pretty good. Pretty advanced for a 5th grader.
Well, here's another one I like a lot, and this takes poetry to a kind of a more personal growth realm, almost spiritual, and it's a little book. I took a spiritual class. It was a 6-month spiritual class, and this is from God for lovers of God everywhere. Poems of mystic Christians, and Thomas Merkin wrote this poem. Thomas Merkin is a Trappist monk, that kind of vows of silence, and he's a very popular kindred spirit of the Dalai Lama, popular with Buddhist followers of Buddhism, and he wrote this poem about 60 years ago. It's called In Silence. Be still. Listen to the stories of the wall. Be silent. They try to speak your name. Listen to the living walls. Who are you? Who are you? Whose silence are you? Who, be quiet, are you as these stones are quiet? Do not think of what you are unless less of what I may one day be. Rather, be what you are. But who? Be the unthinkable one that you know not now. It's just in praise of silence and beginning to understand in another way just who you are through silence itself. You know, I don't read this stuff every day. This isn't my deal. I do try to meditate nowadays. It's poetry, but I'm kind of off and on that. But this just shows this over time, this wonderful presentation of things that are truly important to us, whether it's silence or mercy or persimmons.
Well, that poem, I kind of got a little chill because of the synchronicity of, letting the walls speak, and here we are in this gallery with these paintings, and there was a line about, what is your name, or say your name, and I think, say their names, I think.
Say your name. Say her name.
So,
Say her
right,
name.
Say Her Name is the name of the show that we're in right now.
Oh, really?
So the walls are speaking, and when you read that, I was kind of like, okay, that's an interesting poem out of 1,000 poems that you bring here today to read that one. And
Well, I got a Say Her Name poem. You guys want to hear a Say Her Name poem?
that's the Breonna Taylor poem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breonna
that.
Taylor,
That'd be great.
who I had a hard time with this poem because my son was telling me there was some cultural appropriation associated with it. So I tried best to make it work. But should I do this one, Bob? Say her name?
Sure.
All right, let's see. Okay, in April, was it April or May, Vanity Fair had a whole issue devoted to Breonna Taylor. And Te-Hashi Coates, I'm not saying that right. Yeah, was in charge of the whole issue. He was the editor of it. And they hired a woman who did the painting of Michelle Obama's portrait to do a portrait of Breonna Taylor for the cover of it. So it was this beautiful blue, and Breonna Taylor in this dress that was copied from the Statue, not the Statue of Liberty, but the Lady of Justice, you know, in her dress. And so here's the poem anyway. It was inspired by the interview of Ta-Nehisi Coates with Breonna's mother and the cover of the magazine. So here it is.
With sirens in the background.
Yeah, right. On the cover of Vanity Fair, Breonna stares into our eyes from the top magazine crib in the crepe dress of Lady Justice, hand pressed into her hip. Age 4, sitting crisscross applesauce, 4 cornrows, one askew, anxious for Grandpa to call her name to karaoke the blues. After hanging the star on the tree, she switches the Yule stockings, nods smirks to her sister. Mother mules, oh Lord, she's so bossy. A dinner cookout, she proclaims, with Grandma and Grandpa here. The teenager sorts playing cards, dominoes, and lights the fire. She and Kenny talk about marriage, a home, a child in Louisville, with ring and M. Jordan baby shoes. A huge surprise, his goal. After the ER graveyard shift, scrub-dressed in Lucky's, she phones. Mama, I'm making my friend's chili. Is it beef, pork with bones? Deep in sleep, the window cracked, tulip tree brushes the screen mesh. Her front door smashed down, 6 holes into her flesh. Briona stares into my eyes, but deeper this time, asks, can I count on you? Are you ready this time? I took a class, social justice class, and wrote that poem in that class. And I did another poem, social justice poem, that's more about me this time. Rather than Breonna Taylor staring at me, asking me, are you ready this time? Which is a great question for a lot of us. I'd read 1619 when it came out a year and a half ago. And I joined Black Lives Matter. I thought, I got to do something. What should I do? And I joined Black Lives Matter. And that was all. You know, and I wasn't doing much. And then this thing happened, and it's like, you know, you got to take this to a higher level. And anyway, so. But here's another one I did my social justice class about. It was about me. It's called Who Won? Who Won? We scowled in silence, trudging home. The Clay twins finished 1-2 in the all 5th grade race across the asphalt playground, wearing saddle shoes and plaid dresses. I Like Ike button sagged proud on my striped t-shirt in the 5th grade class picture, taken 2 months after the election. President Ike had whipped the Nazis. Adlai sounded like Adolf. One day that summer I sat up early, tugged the lumps out of my bedspread, unbanded my baseball cards, laying out rows of capped familiar faces over colorful backgrounds, idols of the diamond. I like to sort and resort. Close the door, I segregated them in piles, blacks and whites. Too young to know why, old enough to hide from my mother. I picked 2 all-star teams, blacks captained by Mays, Minoso, Aaron, on one side of the spread, across from Mantle, Musial, Feller, and 6 other white players. Eyeball to eyeball, like Eckersley staring into Gibson, waiting for the umps play ball. In which stadium would this game be played? Cards' back sides list their career numbers. RBIs, ABs, BAs, 2Bs, 3Bs, HRs. Across a tablet I recorded home runs slugged by the all-star teams. Checked my addition twice, had to be sure. So, yeah.
So baseball and social justice.
Yeah, baseball and social justice. I remember that. And yeah, I'm not going to say who I was pulling for, but I added up the homers, figuring that's one way you could see who would win this game, this magical game, the black men or the white men.
I think Mays and Aaron alone would tilt that game.
Well, you know something? I don't remember. I could get those cards. We could redo them. Yeah.
And you grew up in Altadena, right?
Altadena. I was Southern California. I went to college in West Los Angeles. There's one thing that is kind of fun. We would do is that we play baseball in the evening, wiffle ball, until it got dark. And this poem, "If God Invented Baseball," by Ethelbert Miller, has these these great poems. He's a black poet, baseball player, retired. And one of them I remember was Playing Till Dark. This was us. Bob, this is probably you too. It's probably every boy that played baseball in the summer. When we could no longer see the ball, we walked home sadly, dragging our bats and sometimes wearing our gloves on our heads. Exhausted but happy, the light in our eyes, even stars could see. And I wrote this one poem sort of after this, remembering what we did in the twilight of Altadena, Southern California. We're playing wiffle ball in the cul-de-sac, doing our own imitation of Vince Scully, announcing a game. It goes like this: 3-2, 2 out, 9th inning. Drysdale winds. Wiffle ball sails over the hedge. That actually happened. So,
I always like the way Vinny always used to say, "Deuce is wild."
Deuce is wild.
Right?
Yes,
Turn
that's
to
right.
count, 2 outs. Sometimes it would be, the second inning, and the batter would be number 2, and he would always notice the twos. Probably still does.
There's actually one in here that I was going to read for you, Bob. Bob's from San Francisco, or from the Bay Area. He was a San Francisco Giant fan since he was like 4. This is called Juan, Willie, and the Boys. In the park, we high-kicked before throwing the ball. We wanted to be Marshall more than Mays, unless we were running around the bases. Then we wanted our caps to fly off, giving us more speed than the big boys. Reaching home, we were safe, the backs of our arms covered with dust, our good shirts torn, but everyone laughing. Fall down silly. That's you, Bob.
That was, we wanted to be Mays, Marichal, and McCovey. So our wiffle ball league was called the 3M League in honor. We couldn't decide which one. So, well, they're all M's. So we were the 3M League, and still are. Well, I wanted to read a couple of your poems that I think kind of jumped out at me. I mean, this the sonnet, is it a crown sonnet or a double crown sonnet? I forget. Crown sonnet.
It's actually a Royal Crown sonnet.
Royal Crown sonnet is 15 sonnets, and I love this. These poems that you wrote about your friend in France. I don't think I ever met Chris, but how you traveled there. I kind of got the feeling that you spent a lot of time going out and kind of following the journey of Van Gogh and the places where Van Gogh had painted and lived, and then eating oysters and drinking wine, and with Chris and his wife.
Yeah.
So these are. I'm going to pick. I just wanted to read a couple of these sonnets. So I'm going to pick number 12, and then the last poem,
Okay.
number 15. So 12, and this is from Trailing Van Gogh, Elegy for an Artist, from Rick's book Under the Overstory.
And the cover's by Chris. That's
And the cover's by Chris.
yeah.
I think we've got a camera going, but I'm not sure. So this is number 12, Saint Marie de Provence, 2016, After Wheat Fields with Cypress. Alone in the wheat fields nearby St. Paul's, we're dazed where he finished his finest landscape. Tree forms, the focal point, dominate a knoll a short hike from his cell with easel and paint. His curled golden white ribbons, wild, free, with contrasting shades of blue, black, and green. Wheat waving in wind towards the silver tree, red poppies, cream fennel dot the scene against craggy limestone peaks aglow. The clouds, muscled guards for what's beyond. An olive tree reminded Van Gogh of Gethsemane, Christ's last night forlorn. Can you believe this place? Asks Chris and waves uphill. The cypress green flames light heaven's playbill. And number 15, and this is the final sonnet in the series of 15 sonnets. Hey, look who's here. We kiss both cheeks as Rue Malbec Cathedral chimes 5 times. West of the canal, flowing through Van Gogh's scene, you yell, "A Mistral! Time for cards and wine!" We huddle inside to escape the night air. Above the water hovers the drawbridge where the cicadas, you jest, drove Van Gogh mad, and he left a bloody left ear on its edge. We can't move, stuffed with Toulouse country fare, but with brush and paint we head to the madhouse and Van Gogh's room above a lavender prairie, over blowing wheat fields, below Les Alpilles. The cypress green flames light heaven's playbill when dark time prods its unexpected chill.
Wow. Well done, Bob.
It's always kind of fun to hear your poems read back at you.
You read it a lot better than I do.
No, I don't know. I
love that.
I like your readings.
That last, the 15th sonnet in the Crown is actually, picks the first line of the preceding 14 sonnets. And so, a lot of people when they're doing a Crown sonnet, they plan it out ahead of time. They'll write the last sonnet, and that's sort of the seed sonnet, and then from each, then they write the 14 before it. I didn't do that. I didn't think about that, and I was doing it. And I got close to the end, I went, oh my God, what's the 15th going to read like? Oddly enough, it read pretty well, you know. And I made sure the rhymes would work, so it was a true sonnet. But that was, the early 2020. It was for me, poetry that year was really great. That first 4 months of 2020, I took the Crown Sonnet class and wrote the 15 sonnets of the Crown with great help from Connie Gutowski and even more help from Bethany Humphreys, squaring things away. And then I had April was Poetry Month, and I did a poem a day in April. I can't say they're all great. I probably got 8 poems out of there that
That's a good month.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my bar's a little lower, I think. But anyway, it was a wonderful thing. I'd get up at 6:30 every morning and get the prompt that was put out by the teacher. And I was excited. I got up all excited. I wanted to, in bed, I grabbed my cell phone, I'd look at the prompt and go, oh my God, today I get to write a poem about this, you know? And it would take me most of the day. It didn't matter, it was COVID, so you could just be inside. And then I took a porosity class, which I really had no idea of how, you know, the sounds and the rhymes and the meter was, and that was a great class. So that was the first part of 2020 was good for poetry. It wasn't so good for a lot of other reasons. Yeah. I did have another poem I wanted to read.
Sure.
A big part of Under the Other Story is poems I wrote about my wife, Mary Ann, who's this wonderful woman who there's a number of poems in here that how she taught me. I said, did you have one of the lines of something about I was homeschooled for 40 years. Did I ever raise my hand? She really helped bring me up. And this thing is this was something I wrote a couple years ago for our kind of a Christmas letter type thing we sent out to my friends. And when she was just moved into the facility, but it's called Wonderful Counselor, 1974. There was, this will speak for itself. There's an epigraph, is that it, Bob? Epigraph?
Epigraph.
Not epigraph, epigraph. The man may be the head of the household, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head whichever way she pleases. That's from My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's a prose poem. She frowns, balancing the wobbly checkbook, her chamomile tea cold. Neck scarf flying, he bounds in through the back door, carrying a Whammo popcorn maker from the hardware store and 5 pounds sack of kernels. She smiles as they sit down at the Formica table to her fresh vegetable bean soup. Between sips, he points his spoon nowhere, pressing his case to keep red china out of the UN. Rubbing her neck, acknowledging his insights, she begins leafing through the joy of cooking with pencil in hand, planning dinners for the coming week. The mail pours through the slot in the front door, splattering on the linoleum tile. He separates 5 Christmas envelopes, tossing them on the end table, covering the first issue of Ms. She opens them with care, not ripping the return addresses, studying each, her heel taps to Handel's Messiah on the phonograph. Wonderful, Counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. He winces, remembering he hasn't checked on the lighting of the Christmas tree at Daly's department store. Along the curb before dinner, he waxes the faded blue Corolla in repeating figure eights, can of Miller High Life on the hood. He is unable to get the 12 days of Christmas out of his head. 10 Lords Leaping? She comes up beside him, wrapping an arm around his waist, declaring, "Our car has never looked so pretty." Then pins a yellow 3x5 note card to his gray college sweatshirt and pats it twice. Neck bent, he reads upside down, "Honey, we should leave at 10:30 tonight for Christmas Mass, okay? Love, M." It's kind of wife Marianne is very quietly does what really needs to be done. Well, I'm out getting the popcorn, the Whammo popcorn
Out
maker.
running around. She's taking.
And I'm polishing the old car, and listening to with the 12 Days of Christmas going in my head. But and it's one of those things that after she was sick and pretty much mentally gone, then a flood of things that she had said and done over the years, which I thought were, really, is that necessary? Yeah, I began to see they were necessary. There's a purpose behind it all. And it was put forth in a way that hopefully over time I would understand. It was not done with a club, but with the sugar. Anyway, there's a number of other poems about her. That's one of the reasons this book was so much enjoyable to put it together as a tribute to her. I dedicated it to her. And I haven't heard from my kids. I was afraid they were going to ask me, what this is all about, Dad? In the dedication, it says, "To Marianne, you prove to us the importance of only a few good rules." And I remember that debate, or this discussion with the kids at the dinner table about rules. And she said, we only have a few good rules. And they're going to be enforced, and you follow them. And there are rules like kindness, respecting adults. It's just basic human things, Didn't say I have a rule against no smoking, didn't have a rule against swearing, didn't have a rule against all those things that kind of get in the way of relationships with parents and their kids, because they kind of wonder, what is this all about? Just a few good rules. And that was enlightening to me. I was going, oh, really? I thought as a dad I got to kind of crack the whip. No, you don't. So, anyway, yeah.
Well, we have maybe a minute or two left. First, I really want to thank you. This was fun, as I knew it would be. And I want to thank Lawrence Dinkins, our producer here today, and Barbara Range, who is allowing us to use her gallery, and the walls that are speaking to us while we're here. One question, and what are you going to do? What's kind of your next, have you got any projects or anything new you're working on, and maybe kind of finish up with that?
Well, I got a couple things. One is a project, and I got 2 or 3 alternatives, but I want to put something of art and interest in the front yard. I'm a better reader of poetry. I hear guys like Lawrence, you. A few nights ago, there was the women's poetry reading at And there was that one woman, I think she teaches at Folsom.
I think you said it was Stajabu.
Yeah.
You loved her, yeah, you wanted, yeah.
So I got her, yeah, I think you gave me her address. I'm going to connect her out, see if she'll give me some lessons, paid lessons in how to read poetry. 'Cause I'm not getting it out there, you know. I did call a theater arts guy, see if he would give me some lessons. Maybe that will help me, because I need to put my heart into it. And I'm not a great reader, so that's one thing I really want to work on, because I like stand-up poetry. This one book I brought, stand-up poetry, is really a great book, poetry book. But you got to be able to
Well,
put it all into it, you know. And that's one thing, and the other is the front yard.
well, you've come a long way in 4.5 years in both writing and reading and reading out loud, I think. And that's, I think, the beauty of it is just having new stuff to learn, right? That's why we're excited. I mean, I'm taking classes and with you, and even when I'm teaching a class, I'm learning new stuff. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the great things, is we have so much to learn. Thanks to you, most of all, Rick Rayburn today, our poet, as Coffee and Poets returns to the Sacramento poetry scene. We are here. It's March 14th, 2021, and thanks again, Lawrence, and thanks for coming, everybody.
All right, good to be here.